In this video we want to talk about types of negotiating situations. You'll see from the bottom right hand corner of the slide that we've got 98 slides in here, so it's quite a long video. It's well worthwhile having a break and making some notes and having a rest and coming back and completing it. Do make some notes because it's an important topic. It's one which does come up for assessment, so pay some attention to it. So the types of negotiating situations. Well, the process of negotiation takes place with two parties. There must be two involved for negotiations, at least two. We can't negotiate with ourselves, so at least two. And this can include individuals, so one person talking to another, one person talking to a group of people. So we can have negotiations in that format, individuals dealing with individual situations. We could have customers, we can have companies talking to an individual customer or talking to a group of customers. Again, there is some sort of negotiations perhaps between them regarding the quality of a product or a breach of contract or some issue associated with customers being disgruntled about their treatment by the company, or perhaps even customers perhaps negotiating directly with outlets over prices or over terms of delivery or whatever. We can have negotiations between employers. We could have employers in an area even negotiating with each other about the workforce and about training schemes, and collaborating in the provision of training schemes that would be generic, that would benefit both sets of workers, let's say. It's possible for employers to talk to each other and to negotiate agreements regarding sharing the labour force and sharing skills or developing skills within the area or within the region. Trade unions, one of the parties to negotiations may be trade unions. The trade union negotiating with employers, for example, in some sort of collective bargaining situation. So we think of negotiations, we could have that type of situation. We can have companies negotiating with employers from different sectors to see if they can share skilled workers, or it could be companies negotiating with outlets over prices or discounts, or companies negotiating with individuals regarding perhaps issues surrounding pollution or noise or traffic, or there can be negotiations in all sorts of ways between different parties. The employees may negotiate with the companies over higher wages or salaries or better conditions of employment. It could be negotiations of that format. The employees may negotiate directly with the companies and not involve trade unions. It depends. There could be employee representatives. Trade unions could be representative of employees, or a works council, or perhaps the chairperson of the works council could be an employee representative, and he or she could then negotiate with the companies or with the employers regarding wages, terms of employment, conditions, and so on. So virtually anybody can negotiate, and negotiating situations arise in a wide variety of formats and for a wide variety of reasons. It can be ranging all the way across from individuals to small groups to all the way across to big multinational corporations who may negotiate. We even get governments negotiating with each other over trade or over some issue. So negotiations are part and parcel of life. Management can be involved in the following negotiation situations. Management, for example, looking at differences between managers. So management may be involved in trying to reconcile issues within the company, issues caused by disputes between managers. We think of managers as a fairly homogeneous group, a group who get along and work together. But in fact, managers are people, and they may have differences, and they may have different approaches to situations. So it may mean that senior management may have to reconcile differences between managers in management. It could be grievance handling, individual complaints against employees or management. Some people working may have a problem with other people working, and there could be a grievance situation. There could be bullying at work, or insults, or threatening behaviour, or it could be management is abusing the workforce, asking them to do too much, or all sorts of issues. I'm only picking on some illustrative points here. We can imagine a wide variety of issues surrounding each of these. Bargaining, the process of negotiation between management and a group of employees. Bargaining concerns a collective agreement, for example, wages, working conditions, working hours, holiday entitlement, and so on. So there can be bargaining between the groups. It's negotiations and bargaining to try and find solutions that will enable the organisation to continue and reconcile the differences between the negotiating parties, let's say between the employees and the employers, so that both sides understand what each other wants and can reconcile those differences. There could be group problem solving, negotiations to reach settlement agreement. It could be that groups have problems and the groups have to negotiate to find a solution, to find a way forward so that they can work together. Now, I've only listed out some examples of ways in which management and grievance handling and bargaining and group problems and so on can involve negotiations. I've only picked a few of these, but you can imagine in a complex society, in a complex world in which we live, there can be many issues that may require negotiations. Each one of these headings may involve many issues. So, issues of individual concerns. Well, the issues could be, for example, grievance handling and between individual members of management. So here there are individuals involved, perhaps two members of management negotiating over some issue about the use of particular machines or the layout of the plant or some issue between them. And there can be grievance issues involving, let's say, the employees upset with management over some change to the work routine. So we can imagine a whole variety of reasons for these, but these are individual. You can also imagine group concerns where there would be bargaining to try and find a solution, find a way forward, and group problem solving exercises to try and get more cohesion within the group, more understanding, and reconcile differences and solve problems. Of course, there are common elements here, and the common element would be that these involve negotiations. They involve give and take. They involve compromise, understanding each other, and trying to reconcile the differences. The negotiation between managers. Well, negotiating, I should say, can occur between managers regarding differences and conflicting interests. Sometimes managers may want particular employees to do particular tasks because the employees have good skill sets, but not all the managers can benefit from the employees at the same time. There may be conflict. There may be conflict over the use of machinery or over priority in terms of layout or the design of departments or the sequencing of jobs. So the ingredients for dispute are almost ever present. It's finding some negotiated settlement, an agreement where the managers are able to go forward and work with each other. That's what negotiations is about. Managers may negotiate with their colleagues in the same department or other departments within the business. For example, finance, HR, marketing, sales, and so on, production, and so on. They may also be all negotiating with each other, trying to find solutions to problems, getting priority in certain areas of work, and ensuring that the work passed from one department to the next is good quality and easily understood, and so on. So all the time there is agreements to be worked out and negotiations to be undertaken. Negotiations can occur between management at senior and junior levels also. Senior management may have to negotiate. Different directors or vice presidents, or whatever you wish to call them within an organization, they may have differences that they need to reconcile as well. And it can be junior management having problems, trying to reconcile issues and negotiate settlements. It could be the junior management have to deal with the employees and negotiate with the employees to get their commitment to certain aspects of the job or changes that are being proposed. And these must be negotiated. Typical management negotiations include recommended course of action regarding particular situations. For example, different approaches to employee complaints. Well, within an organization, ideally the management should treat all employees the same and have the same approach to employee complaints. So it's a question of making sure that there is a singular approach, a single approach to resolving issues raised by employees. And having that approach itself may be the product of negotiations and compromise and understanding between different layers of management. Suggested modification to employment practices and procedures. For example, the introduction of incentive schemes or benefit packages. These have to be negotiated as well between the managers who understand the effects of these schemes and understand the technicalities of the schemes, and who may not like certain parts or may wish to see some parts being strengthened or further improved. But also they may have to be negotiated with the employees. Management and employees have to negotiate what is what would be the impact of, let's say, incentive schemes, and how fair are the schemes, and what are the implications of the introduction of such a scheme. Typical management negotiations include gaining financial support or whatever, and staffing and equipment resources. This will require communicating with other departments. Companies tend to have allocated budgets down to the departments, and sometimes those budgets have to be negotiated. The departmental manager will have to negotiate with finance and with the senior management to, let's say, increase his or her budget. That would have to be negotiated. The budget would then be used for training and for perhaps new equipment and or some improvement to the layout of the department, or some aspect which will improve the lives of the employees, the working lives of the employees, or will further enhance productivity of the department. But the budget itself would have to be negotiated. It could be that the negotiations try to gain commitment and managerial support to a proposed course of action. Sometimes negotiations are really a way of imparting the plans and the ideas of senior management to junior management, imparting them and getting them to agree, and it appears like a negotiation, but it may be the transfer of information from one level to the next. But nonetheless, it does give the opportunity for junior management to raise issues and perhaps get some concessions and get those get the bad parts associated with any changes, get those ameliorated, and generally negotiate. Course of action. Well, managers can sometimes suggest different solutions to situations or problems. So managers can often, during the process of communications and negotiations, find different solutions to situations or problems. Sometimes in the course of negotiating with people within the department, with junior management or with employees, issues and ideas are brought forth that need consideration, and perhaps some of the ideas may be very beneficial to the organisation that simply has not been brought up before. So negotiations can improve communications, which can improve the way the business is run and lead to efficiencies. So negotiations itself can be a good thing. On the other hand, of course, you could make the counter argument and say, well, negotiations are time consuming, they may be problematic, they may cause bad feelings between different members of staff, and therefore they are counterproductive. Depends on which way it happens. Managers may hold different views and have different experiences and approach problems from different perspectives. As long as people are involved, managers are people, and people do tend to have different views and different experiences, different backgrounds, different preferences, and all of this has to be reconciled, and it's reconciled through a negotiating system. If it's done by edict, if the senior management simply issue an order, then the junior management may follow it, but it may damage their loyalty to the organisation. It may damage their motivation. It may even cause them to eventually leave the organisation and take with them skills and past training and expertise, and therefore the organisation will lose out, will suffer as a consequence of not negotiating by simply issuing commands. So negotiating is, generally speaking, a more cooperative way of working and will tend to promote loyalty and more productivity. The finance manager, for example, will be concerned with budgets, and the HR manager will be concerned with staffing employees. You can see immediately that the organisation is composed of management from widely different backgrounds, and as such they are going to have to negotiate, give and take, and reconcile differences if they are to work together. They have vastly different backgrounds and experiences. The purpose of negotiating is to persuade other managers of the benefits in choosing their proposed plan to resolve a problem. So negotiations is really trying to win over other people, win over the others by negotiating with them, understanding their perspective, but trying to get them to side with you, to side with the negotiator, trying to get them to give up their position and come over. But of course the two sides are trying to do it. The other side is trying to do exactly the same, and that's where the conflict rests. But it's trying to resolve the differences, find common ground, essentially to get the other party to give up a lot and ask for little. But of course the other party wants to do exactly the same, and that's why negotiations take place, and that's why negotiations are so important. If persuasion is successful, then the agreed solution will be implemented by all managers. Of course, if they manage to persuade each other in terms of negotiations that the issues can be reconciled, and they can be, in fact, be reconciled very easily, then there is no problem. There is no need for negotiations. It has been reconciled. The issue has been reconciled. The issue has been fixed. If a solution cannot be agreed during negotiations, then senior management will take the final decision based on the information provided. So sometimes when management negotiate between themselves over different issues, they can't reach an agreement. Their positions are perhaps entrenched. They're fixed in their position, and they can't move. They've always done it this way, and they're not going to change now. That's usually the point that's made. If that's the case, then senior management will be required to break the impasse. Senior management will have to come in and make a decision, and then force that decision through. Gaining resources. Well, negotiation can occur when management require resources to help them achieve their departmental goals, policies and practices. As I said earlier, organizations tend to run with a master budget, and the master budget in turn has departmental budgets, and departmental budgets may be broken down into sub-budgets again. But the departments may have to negotiate to try and get an increase in their budgets, particularly if they want to buy a new machine, or reorganize the department, or refurbish the department, or they want to do something. So they have to negotiate an increase in their budget. So perhaps once a year, when the budgets are being issued, the various departmental heads will try to negotiate more resources into their budgets. Managers will negotiate with senior managers and persuade them to allocate resources for the department to accomplish their goals. So whatever the department goals are, they try to get those reconciled, get those to meet the goals. But to do that, they have to negotiate with the senior management for their budgets to be altered, to get more resources for the department. Senior management may decide to invest resources in other projects instead, projects that they feel are more important. So senior management will take a different perspective, will look at the various departments, but senior management may also be looking towards something quite radical, something new, and it wants to spend resources there. Well, then all the departments who depend on the allocation from the centre will have to negotiate and try to make the case that their department is special, and their department need the resources, and their department deserves funding. Grievance handling. Well, grievance is a complaint made by an employee about their manager or other employee. Sometimes one employee may bully another, or one employee may upset another, or affect the way he or she is working, or just generally alienate the other person. Now, that could be seen as very counterproductive, very bad for productivity and for the health of the working life of the individual employees. Someone's life is being made a misery by someone else. So to address this, there is a system of grievance handling. But again, the issue may be resolved by negotiations. It may be resolved by the parties stating their case as to what happened or what was said or what was the situation, and trying to argue that their position was acceptable and the other person was not. But again, trying to find common ground, trying to find a way forward, trying to understand each other, and perhaps a member of staff, a manager, trying to reconcile the two. But it could also be a grievance because a manager is making an employee's life difficult for whatever reason. It could be bad management, and there could be a grievance situation because of that. A grievance arises when an employee feels that they have been mistreated, discriminated, or terms of their employment contract has been breached. So an employee can bring a grievance if any of these issues arise. And when we read the list, it is a serious list. When they have been mistreated. Well, people don't go to work to be mistreated. They go to work to earn a living. So it's not nice to be mistreated, and they should have some redress for that. They could be discriminated against on the basis of their colour or religion or gender or age, and that is criminal, but it could still happen. It could still happen perhaps in subtle ways, and again, perhaps the way to deal with it is by bringing a grievance accusation against some manager perhaps. Grievances result in ill feelings and resentment if they are not handled appropriately. It's very important that grievances are properly treated and understood, and that there is a formal mechanism to deal with these. They are serious, and therefore they're entitled to serious consideration. Grievances are important to the individual making the complaint. Clearly, if someone makes a complaint, they are taking on a lot of work and a lot of commitment, but they feel that they need to have the issue addressed. Management must negotiate with the individual making the complaint. A solution must be negotiated and resolved. So when a complaint is levied against the organisation must negotiate with that person and try to resolve the issue, try to figure out what happened, what caused it, what's the core of the complaint, try to address it and fix it and negotiate a way forward for the individual and the organisation. For example, the affected employee may demand an apology in order to resolve the situation, I should say. The employee may have been insulted or upset or maligned in some way by a manager because of some incident. Perhaps there was a failure of quality and the manager said something quite derogatory about some employee, and perhaps the manager needs to apologise in the same way that people outside the working situation can apologise to each other if they transgress. Grievance arises due to a number of factors. Payment has been miscalculated or not paid on time. That's a grievance situation. People need to have their salaries and wages paid at a particular time. That's when they have their outgoings and their commitments to meet. So if it's not paid, then there is grounds for a grievance. Opportunities for promotion have been denied without a valid reason. Sometimes vacancies arise within organisations for some promotion, and perhaps some members, some employees are not considered, just simply not considered, simply bypassed, and others are invited to apply. Well, that could be grounds for grievance procedures. Training opportunities might be denied. Sometimes organizations provide training for some workers and not for others. That could be based on discrimination. It could be a form of sexual harassment, bullying, racial abuse by other colleagues. So people are involved in working situations. They come in contact with each other, and their differences may show up. It might be differences in opinion which can be reconciled, but if it's based on prejudice, it can be based on their gender, their colour, their race, their culture, their religion, their appearance. It can be based on anything which causes a problem. It's not a problem for the people, it's a problem for the people who caused the problem. But a grievance issue, a grievance situation may arise for a whole variety of reasons. Could be poor working conditions and pay, and that could be grounds for a grievance procedure. Sometimes employers don't pay like they've promised, or they're in violation of their contract. Sometimes overtime work is restricted to particular employees. Overtime work is usually paid at a premium, usually something like time and a half. So, in other words, workers who are paid, let's say, by the hour will get time and a half. They'll get their hourly rate plus 50% if they work overtime. Well, clearly that's very attractive for some workers. So overtime working is a boost to their income, but only some employees may be offered that. The ones who are not offered it, you could say, are discriminated against, but on the other hand, it may be just simply bad handling on the part of management, but it could give grounds for a grievance inquiry. Most organizations have a procedure in place to deal with grievance complaints. It's important, particularly in large organizations where there are many people working, that there is a widely understood grievance procedure. Before a formal procedure is taken into consideration, informal methods must be considered for resolving the problem. It's always worthwhile, before it gets too formal, to see if the solution can be found informally by talking to those affected and trying to reconcile them before it goes formal, to see if a solution can be found. Management will negotiate with both parties to arrive at a solution before taking formal procedures. So the management should really talk to each side and try to reconcile the two sides, try to get them to talk to each other and get them to understand each other, and remove the problem before it gets too big and too complicated. Now, bargaining. Well, collective bargaining is one element of negotiation. That's when, let's say, unions and management negotiate over pay, over working conditions, holiday entitlement, and so on. And that's termed as collective bargaining. The process of collective bargaining is to resolve disputes that affect a group of employees. When employees have issues with the management or with some aspect of the working situation, then it could involve the trade union getting involved to try and help them resolve the issue. But as far as possible, negotiations in advance of some big issue arising, negotiations to try and resolve it right at the start, resolve it and remove the problem. That is the optimum. That's the preferred way to move forward. If that does not happen, the issue can get big and it could lead to bigger problems down the line. It could lead to strikes or withdrawal of labour, which could damage the organisation and damage employment prospects as well. Disputes can include wages, working conditions, benefits and incentives. In fact, it can run right way across the organisation. Everything from overtime working and discrimination, holiday entitlement, working conditions. Disputes can arise in all sorts of areas. Groups of employees, union representatives and officials come together to raise the disputes with the employer. So the idea is that there is an issue, and if it's recognized by the workforce, then the workforce will see management and try to get the issue resolved, negotiate with them and get it resolved. There are different types of bargaining situations. There is integrative bargaining, distributive bargaining, intra-organizational bargaining, and let's start with integrative bargaining. This type of bargaining situation involves a list of demands from each party. So a list of demands from each party. The group of employees collectively proposed their demands, such as pay, working conditions and length of working hours. So let's say some employees list out their requirements, their demands, and they're listed as higher pay, let's say better working conditions, shorter working hours, for example. The employer then considers the proposals and suggests counter proposals, creating a negotiating situation. So they're negotiating to resolve the issue. There's a difference between the employer and the employee. So what needs to be done is both sides need to be integrated. They need to have a coming together. They need to recognize common ground and move to the common ground in terms of their requirements. Unlike grievances, which only gains the interest of one employee, bargaining is the collective interest of a group of employees. So bargaining normally is a group within the organization resolving some issue. The employees in total getting a higher pay settlement or better working conditions. It's bargaining for the group. It is possible for individuals to bargain, but it depends on the nature of the job, it depends on the uniqueness of the job, the specialism of the person negotiating, and it depends on many factors. By and large, in large organizations, workers are grouped under different headings. Some will be grouped as particular types of engineer, particular types of secretary, particular types of manager. And once they're being grouped under those headings, then the pay and working conditions will apply to that group, will apply to that individual as well. So bargaining is usually related to groups, but it is possible to envisage bargaining based on an individual. But generally speaking, we talk about it in terms of groups. Successful negotiation occurs through constructive compromise between both parties, where there is a trading off ideas and solutions. So successful negotiations is when there is constructive compromise, when they actually agree to, sometimes agree to disagree, but sometimes they agree to compromise and to reconcile their differences. And this may mean that one party has to give up more than they anticipated, but they may do it in the interest of the health of the organization, the survival of the organization, and thereby the survival of their jobs. So sometimes workers will give up to secure the company and secure their positions. But the issue may, of course, stay with them in their memories, and the next time there's negotiations, they will perhaps raise the point that the previous time they compromised. Now it's time for someone else to compromise. So negotiations and bargaining continues. Distributive bargaining. This type of bargaining is not as common as integrative bargaining. Distributive bargaining is based on something for nothing, a win-lose approach, not a win-win. The integrative bargaining is when both sides try to get advantages and they compromise. It could be both benefit, but they don't benefit a lot, but nonetheless they share the total benefits and they share them between them. But distributive bargaining is getting something for nothing. One party will propose their list of demands while the other party accepts. The party will gain and the other party does not, and this means it's like capitulation. One side issues its requirements, its list of demands, and that party will gain, while the other party does not trade for any return. The other party passively accepts. So it's a one-way street. Interorganizational bargaining. This type of bargaining is aimed at resolving disputes between individuals within a bargaining team. So within a bargaining team there can be differences. There are people. Whenever there are people, there's the potential for difference. So within a bargaining team there can be differences, and this tries to resolve the disputes between individuals on a bargaining team. Disputes can occur between groups and can have a negative effect on the overall outcome of negotiations. If one of the parties to negotiations is split because their members are not in agreement with each other, then that group is weak, and the chances are they will lose in the negotiating process. They won't bargain satisfactorily. They will be split, they will have issues, there will be problems, and it means that overall they will not benefit from the negotiations. These disputes need to be resolved before the parties begin the negotiating process. So if one of the parties to a negotiation is split, they have issues between them, they're in dispute over certain things between them, then if they attempt to negotiate with another side whilst having those divisions, the chances are they will lose, because the other side will exploit the differences and will emphasize the differences and will gain more traction, more momentum in the negotiations as a consequence. For example, within the management party, there may be disputes between managers who have different interests and outcomes. Managers may be split. Some managers don't like other managers, or some managers may want more in the allocation, the budget allocations, or they may be jealous of other managers who have achieved bigger budget payouts in the past. Or whatever the reason, in this case the management will be split, will be divided, and therefore in terms of negotiations with, let's say, trade unions, the management will be weakened and may lose as a consequence. The finance manager may be interested in budgets and costs. The HR manager may be interested in staffing and recruitment, etc. So you can see immediately that the managers are very heterogeneous. They're very different. They can be different within their departments. They can have disputes within the departments, but also they're different from each other, which makes getting a single coherent position in negotiations difficult for management. The differences need to be resolved, and all members in the team must reach a common ground. That's the ideal, when all the members of the negotiating team on one side all agree. The English expression is they all sing from the same hymn sheet. They all say the same things, they all understand the situation, they all understand the significance of the situation, they all understand the issues, and they have a single approach. All of them subscribe to one approach. And that's their policy, and that's their negotiating stance. Joint group problem solving. Well, joint group problem solving is a negotiating process which adopts a cooperative approach to problem solving. The aim in this approach is to work with the parties in negotiations to reach solutions. So it's almost a merging of the two sides. When there were differences, the differences have to be reconciled, and there was negotiations. With this approach, both sides will try to reconcile their positions themselves to try and be more cooperative, more agreeing to the other side, so that there's less chance for division or problems. For example, management may wish to impose new policies and initiatives, however, will require employee support in order to accomplish the goal. So when management come up with new policies, it needs the employees on board. The employees are the ones who will implement the policies. So it's in their interest to be cooperative. It's also in the interest of the employees to be cooperative, because their jobs and their careers are also at stake. So it's in everyone's interest to try and cooperate. Management may recruit consultants to negotiate and discuss with employees the merits on implementing new policies. So it could be that the management use consultants to negotiate on their behalf. The employees may use trade unions to negotiate on their behalf. So it's trying to find common ground again. It's trying to find a solution. But sometimes, after the initial presentation of positions, management state their position, employees state their position, then the two sides understand each other. Instead of trying to find common ground between them, they may go away and trying to change their positions to be more accommodating. So when they meet the next time, there's less distance between them. They're almost agreed, or even completely agreed. The aim of joint problem solving is to achieve a win-win solution where employees positively encourage the new changes to policies and initiatives. So with a win-win situation is when both sides agree. Both sides want to see this policy implemented. The management want to see it implemented, but the employees can also see advantages to them from it, and they want it implemented. That's a win-win situation, and therefore the negotiations are easy. In fact, there's no need for negotiations unless there are some minor issues that still need to be resolved. But by and large, if management see a certain set of policies as advantageous, but the employees also see it as advantageous, they see greater job security as a consequence, or perhaps higher salaries in the future, more investment, the employees may subscribe to the policies as well. So both sides want to see them. The focus is on gaining employee cooperation. It's trying to get both sides to agree, but in particular to get the employees to cooperate with the management. So these are some of the types of negotiating situations that we may come across. It may be between managers and other managers, or between employees and the trade union involved on their behalf. There might be some negotiations between those two. It could be between the trade union and the management, collective bargaining. It can be between senior management and junior management over individual budgets to departments. Negotiations is so widespread that sometimes we overlook that it is, in fact, a negotiating situation. But that's all we're going to deal with here. I'm going to leave it at that and say, there's, by the way, the source that was used. I'm going to say thank you for watching.